we as a Catholic have the opportunity to be a part of a great adventure, that we have a part in a great plan, and that we have ourselves a purpose that is unique to ourselves that no one else can do. It is a game changer to frame it in that kind of language, that what we're offering in the church is a great yes and not a no.
Welcome to Stories from the Street. I'm Brian.
And I'm Beth.
And today we are interviewing Aaron Hostetter, who is a youth minister with Lifeteen out in Virginia. And we are going to be talking about Evangelizing Generation Z.
Today, we have an awesome guest. We have Aaron Hostetter. He is a youth minister from Virginia. He's also an area contact for Lifeteen and a number of other things that he's going to tell us about. I'm so excited to be able to talk with Aaron. What do you think, Brian? You've done a lot of work with young people.
I have done a lot of work with young people, mainly college students. I think Aaron does a little bit more with high schoolers and a lot more with the younger generation. I think I've only worked with millennials. I don't know if I've ever worked with Generation Z before, as they
Generation
call them.
Z? What happens
Generation
after that?
Z. Oh, yeah, you're right. We're at the end of the alphabet.
What are they going to do?
Z-A. Z1.
Do you think there's a big difference between the college students that you've worked with and the stuff that Aaron's going to talk to us about?
I did recently give a talk. Actually, it was our 10 Ways to Evangelize talk to high school students. Mm-hmm. And I was telling them all about different ways that they could evangelize even in their everyday life, even especially now using their youth as a time when they can really fall in love with the Lord and be able to share him with others. It's just, I mean, the incredible power that comes with seeing someone who's so young. And normally it's something like about being older, and we're actually contemplating the idea that we might pass, and what does it look like if we're not in the right graces with the Lord. It's like normally you think of going to church as being something for older people, and what does it look like someone who's young to be able to, who's absolutely in love with the Lord and who's giving their life to him. And I was sharing this with them. And I was really doing my best to bring in stories. And afterwards, my only feedback was that in terms of me being able to connect with the teens, they're like, Brian, what was very clear and what came across to us is you were passionate about the Lord, that they were able to catch this enthusiasm that I had for them, and that they actually wanted to start a miraculous medal club because after I gave this 10 Ways to Evangelize talk and shared with them of like being able to just get miraculous medals and just pass them out to friends and just see what the Lord does with it, and be willing to pray with one another. I love that the 10 Ways to Evangelize to talk that we do at St. Paul Street Evangelization, and especially being able to offer that to teens of just like, hey, just don't be afraid to pray with one another. Don't be afraid to pass out the miraculous medal. Yeah, just essentially John Paul II and Jesus's, not afraid. Be not afraid.
No kidding. 365 times in the Bible, I understand.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's what I heard, one for every day. I mean, I didn't count. I was told that. And that's important for young people to be not afraid, because sometimes they don't want to step out from their peers and they need a little bit of encouraging. Anyway, so let's bring on our guest. I am so pleased. This is a young man who is very authentic when he talks to the youth. I've been there at one of his youth group meetings, and I was amazed at how he got everyone's attention. Everyone was focused, and he could explain these beautiful truths of our faith to the whole group, a whole room full. So I'd like to welcome Aaron Hostetter.
Hello.
Hey, Aaron. Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast with us. I would love you to be able to share with everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, I went to Franciscan University of Steubenville and went straight into a youth ministry position in Norfolk, Virginia. And I have been at the same parish. This is my 9th year of youth ministry in that parish.
Wow.
So it has been an awesome run.
When you graduated from Steubenville, Aaron, did you know that you wanted to work with teens, or
Yes.
did you knew from the beginning?
It was something I had discerned and prayed through, even as I graduated high school. I was actually discerning the priesthood and also thinking about, youth ministry, because I had such a strong transformational experience as a youth ministry participant in high school. And so I just saw the value of different jobs that you could do. You could be a doctor and save someone's life, and you could be a youth minister and help someone connect their soul to their creator forever. So there was an attractiveness to it, besides the fact that I myself was so personally transformed by this. And so, I think it would be wrong to say this was my idea of giving back, because it was more like this was me feeling like this is what God gave me that experience to do.
Isn't that amazing? It's such a good story. I love that.
Did you experience any challenges as you began working with teens?
Oh, well, look.
Obviously not. No, you crushed it.
Let me put it this way.
Right from the beginning.
My education at Franciscan University is something that daily is, helping me. However, there's some stuff you just can't learn until you're in, front line.
You're in the trenches.
There are situations you are never going to be prepared for. Like it just, you can't come up with these. You can't come up with these kind of situations that you'll face in a classroom. It's impossible. But but the grace of God is with you. And I luckily had a very, very good and very patient and very strong-willed pastor who was willing to work with me and walk with me to become a good youth minister. And so that was incredibly helpful.
That's a gift
for me.
That's a beautiful gift
to have. And, to have somebody who understands youth ministry, recognizes what it takes to also live a healthy, balanced life of your vocation at home and your work and in ministry. And so for me, I was able to have a very blessed situation so that I'm able to flourish and still be going 9 years in.
There was an article that was recently just published, a study on Generation Z, on, the generation that's now below the two of us, Aaron. And, I'm actually a little bit out of touch with them, with the high schoolers. But I think you reading this article, but also drawing from your experience, what is it that you thought of the article in terms of, do you think it was actually, maybe tell us a little bit about it? Sure. And also maybe if you could speak about your experience working with youth ministry, if you thought that it was right on point or where it might have missed the mark in some areas, I would love for you to just be able to share your expertise with us.
Sure. Well, as a youth minister, finding statistics and studies are really helpful. As you guys know really well, the work of evangelization, the content is always the same, but the method and the means by which you transmit the gospel always is changing and shifting, and it must, because the world is changing and shifting. And so for me to have something like the Barna Group at my disposal, I do have to pay for the study. It's like 118 pages or something like that. It's amazing. It has charts and graphs and findings of basically the culture, beliefs, and motivations that shape the current generation of teens. So for me, it's a treasure trove of information for me to help prepare myself for the next steps in training my volunteers, and what should I be focusing on when this kid walks in my door. How do I recognize where they're coming from and what their mentality is? So this study is something that just came out in, I believe, January. So I will admit that I'm still absorbing a lot of it. And so I'm only going to speak from a couple of my very initial impressions from it. And a couple of there's basically four main pillars that the study looked at with young people. The first was identity, how they define themselves, what makes them who they are, worldview, their spiritual and moral beliefs, and their understanding of what life is about. The third is motivations, their life goals and priorities, and what they think is important. And then the last is their views on faith and church, what they think about Christianity and Christian community. So basically, a couple of things that I will just say, I'm not going to talk about 118 pages worth of stuff, but there's a couple of main factors that I will like to point out. The first is relativism, and the second is technology, as two huge driving force themes that are present in a teenager's everyday life. And so the way that relativism impacts a teenager is this postmodern culture that they're growing up in. It's post-Christian. It's really a departure from a traditional sense of morality, a traditional sense of the faith, and it impacts a lot of the way that they identify themselves. And so one of the things that relativism will do for them is they see a great diversity amongst their peers. So they're the most diverse generation in the history of the United States. And so they'll see this great diversity in not just race, but in belief and thought. And they will look at it and think that it is something that they'll widely accept as normal, and at the same time, they will not be comfortable with challenging somebody else's held beliefs. So one of the problems that relativism brings is that they feel like it's not their place to speak into another person's life in any way possible, because what that means is that I'm judging this person and I'm intolerant of this person, and because they make up their own truth and I make up mine. That's a huge driving force. So for me as a youth minister, that means I can't talk about the Catholic faith until I establish that truth is absolute. And so I can't even start to talk about teachings of the church that are controversial until I even start with that baseline of, well, there's truth, and it doesn't depend on whether you believe it or not. So
it's not like just my truth. I have my truth and everyone else has theirs. Or
this is a whole cultural phenomenon, and how it's become so ingrained in all of us that there is no such thing as absolute truth. Even before you read this study, Aaron, is that something that you had already observed that you needed to do anyways, and this study just reaffirmed that?
Oh, absolutely. I actually just did a series on relativism with my high school teens about a month ago.
And how'd that go?
Huge. It was predictable. A lot of the kids, half of the room was unconvinced walking into it, and their eyes were open greatly because it was a great intellectual discussion, and we were able to use reason and logic to basically unpack and unearth all of the ways that relativism falls all over itself and doesn't actually work. This idea that we're tolerating people, actually we're being intolerant to anyone who doesn't believe in relativism when you subscribe to it. And so you're still being intolerant. You're just being intolerant to a different crowd. Mm-hmm. There's so many different ways that they were really surprised by what we were able to find, that they were really excited to be able to recognize that, well, if our choices don't matter, then our lives don't matter. And a relativistic life is a meaningless life, a life without purpose, a life without meaning and hope. And so to be able to recognize that we as a Catholic have the opportunity to be a part of a great adventure, that we have a part in a great plan, and that we have ourselves a purpose that is unique to ourselves, that no one else can perform, can do. It is a game changer to frame it in that kind of language, that what we're offering in the church is a great yes and not a no.
And that's part of their identity. They're not just one among many of this big, diverse crowd of everything being the same. They are a chosen. They're a child of God.
And the other main driving force that was in the study, that obviously, like as you said, I've already noticed before reading this study, is their use of media, and their use of smartphones in particular, social media. It is, it's something that we all kind of know about. It's something that we've all seen, maybe a few studies here or there talking about smartphones, and the teens that use social media more are more depressed and more anxious. But this report really dives into that. And one thing I would like to say, that there is a difference between Generation Z and adults with social media. And one of the biggest differences is that they grew up in a world where that was the only reality. We, for those of us that grew up before smartphones, we formed our identity, without the use of social media and an online presence, where we would be on the internet and we would be the receivers of content, not the publishers of content. And so there's a huge difference when these teens who are basically native to the technological reality of social media, their identity is greatly formed by their own validation on their social media accounts. And so the way that whether somebody responds with a like, with their picture, with any kind of thing, whether people accept them, there's also this layer of projecting a false reality of themselves, like this idealized version of themselves that they get to project out to the world. So they're also being disingenuous, and it affects their relationships with other people. Because they're setting the controls on every interaction. They decide when they are going to respond to somebody. They decide how they're going to respond, when to respond. So everything about this generation of social media is self-centered, where they decide in every way how their relationship with another person is going to be. And so it does affect them in a couple of different areas. One of them is their relationship with God. If you're not really good at having a relationship with another person in real life, especially when you're doing everything on your own terms, it affects the way that you're having a relationship with God, because doing a relationship with God on your own terms has been a tried and true method of fail, where it just doesn't work. And it affects your relationship with yourself in a couple of different ways. The fact that you are able to go on social media, where it says in this report that teens are on social media, screen media, for 4 or more hours per day, 57% of young people are on social media 4 or more hours per day. So this is a huge part. Time. It's a huge part of their day.
That's a big part of the day. I mean, figure out after school, after sports, after sleeping, after eating, then we got 4 hours. So that's there's no time for just
a lot of it's in between as well. And so they're spending more time on Instagram, on Snapchat, on all the different social media platforms. It does cause them to have a greater sense of depression and anxiety. So while they're not going out and getting hurt and pregnant and like those kind of rates are going down a little bit, their anxiety and depression are skyrocketing.
Wow. Yeah. Do you guys like football? Either of you?
Oh, yeah.
One of the things, I have a football background too. So one of the things that I've heard is there's something called a highlight film. And in football, and you show the high school kids will send their highlight films out to the college scouts, and I heard someone compare that to social media, is what you see from everybody else is their highlight film. So you're living your regular life, but on social media, you see everybody's highlight film. And so you produce your highlight film, and there's a gap between the highlight film and what's on real life.
Again, I'm still kind of blown away by the fact that this is a study about Generation Z, but I would be surprised if the statistics would be any different for any other generation. I think this is more of a cultural thing. And I may be wrong in terms of maybe how it's amplified and maybe the amount of time. But the other thing I'm interested about, Aaron, is this apostolate's about street evangelization. And there's one thing about knowing that this is the way our culture is, especially maybe even the way that our teens are, is they're hypersensitive if we're in a culture that's extremely being formed in relativism. And you, as a youth minister, had this opportunity to sit down and let's have this series where we discuss this. And their parents are dropping off and forcing them to go there, and they're able to be with you and sit with you. And that was your method of being able to have this opportunity to open up their mind to this idea of what the church teaches about truth and what truth really is, and that there is the possibility of an absolute truth. And if that is the case, then, is this Christian story, if there's an absolute truth, is our Christian story the story that is absolutely true? And if that is true, what does that mean for myself, and what does that mean for my life? I mean, we are in street evangelization, don't have this opportunity to have this educational series of, when we're interacting with people that in this relativistic culture, we almost sometimes, it's one, to be able to recognize that there's this problem, but then there's two, the question is how do we form and have, conversations that are able to actually open up people's hearts and minds to the truth.
I think they all appreciated having a dialogue. And so we gave them a voice, and we were able to present the truths about truth. And I think one of the things that really helped was just some of the methodology involved. One of those things was comparing and contrast in kind of a biblical manner, where they would compare whether, I don't know if it would be Roman or Greek culture with what Jesus is offering, and basically we were presenting, well, this is the postmodern relativistic morality, and I'm going to present you what all of the implications with that. And, while using examples and just, showing where that leads. Like I said before, if our choices don't matter, then our lives don't matter. And so, it robs us of a sense of meaning. To be able to hold that in one hand and then just say, well, here's what a classical Catholic worldview of morality looks like. And to be able to show them the goodness of it and present the richness that we have available to us. It's almost like holding up a diamond next to cubic zirconia and just saying, we can look at what is authentic and what is a fake, cheap imitation that doesn't hold up.
And so, how did they receive it?
They received it really well, I think, because look, ultimately, even though they are growing up in a relativistic society, they want something that's authentic and they want something that's real. And so to be able to have something presented in such a way where they can hold on to it, it makes a difference, especially using logic and reason, because our faith is intelligible. This is something that we, when we use reason with faith, it makes a presentation to a young mind that craves it.
When you're presenting this, it's not like you're just coming out of the blue and just throwing stuff at them.
Absolutely.
I mean, they know you, they love you, they trust you.
Yeah.
And so that's a good thing. That's one of the things we don't have on the street. If someone comes up to us and we try to explain it, we're sometimes starting at square one.
Yeah.
And like what Brian says, you have to first love and befriend and gain some trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Aaron, I know you've actually been able to be on the streets with us before. I would love to be. So do you have any stories that came from your time on the streets with St. Paul Street Evangelization?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. You guys are pretty bold. I'm going to give you some. Some honest feedback. I got to tell you, I am so used to a 4-year accompaniment kind of way of evangelization. So for me, I'm used to my walk with a teenager in a relational way being something that doesn't happen in a big moment, but rather week to week to week to week, building a relationship of trust. After the model of St. John Bosco, basically, with the kind of, he had these boys that were from the streets and he brought them in to this community and taught them in a school and really worked with them, and he even said, it is crucial that they know that you love them. And so that's the kind of model that we have in youth ministry, where we're walking with these kids and they know that we care about them. And so once we have established that kind of relationship, it kind of methodologically walks into the deeper steps of a discipleship relationship with God.
So what happened when you were
on that on the street though, huh?
So it didn't work like that on the street. So
did you have any conversations with people?
I just met that moment and realized the gravity of how sudden it passes, because you look around the streets and people are just going about their business. You have no idea what kind of life they have lived, and you have no idea where they're going and what's on their heart and what's on their mind. And the thought of, what do I even say to this person right now? It's a jolting reality for somebody like me who is just not used to having to get it all out in a couple of minutes. Not that you're going to get everything out, but at least to be able to get out a personal invitation to the gospel, a proclamation of the good news. And so that, it was great. I loved it. I was really inspired by it. I came back and I thought about how can I take the urgency with which you have to do this street evangelization, and how can I employ that into my youth ministry process? Because, maybe there is a kid that only shows up once ever to one night because he's there with a friend. Am I ready for that moment? And so I thought it was a really good exercise for me, and a good realization of kind of what you guys do.
Did you come to any conclusions as you thought about that, of how you practically implement what you learned from street evangelization into your youth minister role?
Well, I think just making sure that I am being intentional with everything that I do. I think that's probably one of the things that I thought through as a result of that experience, was just make sure I'm intentional with every conversation that I have, and make sure that I am intentional with everything that I plan. Whether that is a trip, whether that is, a Bible study or a rosary, or whatever we're doing, to make sure that I'm very intentional with that. And then secondly, to make sure I celebrate every kid that comes through the door and make sure they feel welcome. And so those two things can go a long way. When, basically a rule that I've always had in all of the years I've done youth ministry is you have about 3 seconds when a kid walks in the room. You have about 3 seconds. And if you don't engage them in that 3 seconds, you've pretty much lost them for the night. That's when their phone comes out, and they go out to they retreat to their safety net, their different world, and they're gone. And so it's a lot of work to get them back. You can. Wow. But it makes all the difference in the world if right away when they come in, they're engaged, even if it's just a hello, how was your week? And so that's something that, we've already practiced, but it was a good reminder that we really need to make sure that every kid that we have is given our very best.
3 seconds. The only other time that I've heard that you had 3 seconds for something was if you read on the directions of a Pop-Tart that you have to microwave it on high for 3 seconds. And I just read Brian Regan has a joke about that, and it makes me laugh every time. It's like, if you need to be microwaving your Pop-Tarts, you need to slow down your pace of life. You're out zap frying your Pop-Tarts in 3 seconds. I was like, how does the microwave even what does it do in 3 seconds? But that's unbelievable. 3 seconds.
3 seconds. It is not much time.
Lose their attention. That is not much time at all.
But sometimes if you think about street evangelization, we don't have much time to make that initial connection. Our initial connection, would you like a rosary? Can I give you a medal? Would you like a holy card? And they're going to make an assessment of the situation. Is this person authentic? Or am I just, do I want to bother stopping? Do I want to, so I guess in some sense, we just have that initial 3 seconds also to connect enough to see if someone's going to stick around for a conversation.
Yeah. The only other distinction, as Aaron, and what you were talking about, Beth and I actually just led a basic evangelization training at a church down in Southern Indiana. And one of the things that we actually talked about was, in our basic evangelization, we talk a lot about street evangelization and the basic etiquette and how it is that we can engage people right there on the streets and also in our everyday lives. But we also stress the importance that we as a church exist to evangelize, and the way that Jesus asked us to do so in Matthew 28 is to make disciples. Like, the whole point of the church, if we're not making disciples, then we're not
doing our job.
We're not doing our job. And Father Mike Schmitz has this amazing analogy of, if there's a shoe factory that has all the best materials, all the best engineers, all the best equipment, but at the end of the day is not making shoes, it's a failure. You can keep on investing and having the best of everything. And one of the things that I think that's important to recognize in street evangelization is that we, even in our apostolate, recognize that we're supposed to be a bridge from the streets to the parish. And if the people that we encounter, wherever they are able to then go to a parish, or even come to ourselves, like some way, point them to a place where they can be accompanied. And I think even in youth ministry,
like, such an important part.
It is very important, and because we recognize Beth, I think in our podcast earlier, we talked about like the prayer of like repentance and wanting to place Jesus at the center of our lives. Like, I have to pray this every day. It's not something like, so even that 2-minute conversation, someone comes to know the Lord, and then the community and the people you surround yourself with, like, we need to help them get on the journey towards heaven, like through the church, through the sacraments, through discipleship. And that can either be ourselves, and, we have Bible studies, or we have things that we offer them to accompany them on the journey, or we just pray that the parishes have something like that as well. So I think it's a both and. Is we just see ourselves out there on the streets, not saying this is the only way to evangelize. Like it's all in the 2-minute conversation, and we let them go. It's like, no, it's actually, we don't want to just let them go and say, yep, that 2 minutes was all they needed and now they're good for heaven. It's like, no, we need both. Like we need to just be out there extending invitations so that we can eventually, have something further to be able to be accompanied.
And building the community.
We need to be out there.
Youth, having a community to come to for a youth group.
Oh yeah.
That probably helps them a lot.
Oh, it's huge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cause they don't have that at school. They're not going to get that kind of encouragement toward their faith walk, anywhere else. So, sounds like you guys just need one lady at every parish. That's going to be like the Fiddler on the Roof matchmaker lady, where she's gonna welcome these people in and then introduce them to all the people at the parish. And here's these people, and now you can join in fellowship with all these people.
How can we, as a church, more focused on evangelization, being out there in the community, extend invitations? And how do we do that in a loving, prudent way? And I think St. Paul Street Evangelization does an amazing job of setting people up for success, of just getting in their community and extending invitations and praying with them. And obviously, we have this podcast, Stories from the Street, because we're interviewing all these team leaders who have seen an incredible impact by being in the community can have. And extending invitations, and real lives are changing, and real people are coming to know the Lord and being invited into a community. And then 2 is, how can we, as a church, not put everything on our youth minister, like Aaron, like, oh, Aaron's going to make all the disciples. And the rest of the church, we don't have to worry about that because we got Aaron, he's just going to disciple these 100, plus teens, or then go around the region and help other people do that. And it's just like, thank goodness we have Aaron. He's our disciple maker. It's like, how can we as a church,
there you go.
How can we as a church be like, oh no, we're all called to make disciples, and at whatever capacity the Lord can give us. And you're blessed to be able to have the opportunity to do it full time. But how can we empower even all of us Catholics to be able to feel equipped to do that? Is also another, I think, important question that is in discussion with this new evangelization.
You know what? It makes me remember I was at the Convocation of Catholic Leaders, this huge event where they called Catholic leaders from all over the United States.
In Orlando?
To Orlando.
Yeah, I was there.
And
Brian was there too.
So I saw Adam speak at it in one of the panels. But I remember one of the main themes was this idea of invitation and accompaniment. And one of the things that I walked away with, because I was representing my diocese, and so I had to kind of write down notes and, submit some feedback for our diocesan newspaper. But one of the things I noticed was this idea that people are not walking away from the church because of Jesus. They're walking away because of the church, because it's dry, it's uninviting and unappealing. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we are conducting ourselves as parishioners. Are we, you can even start it at the family unit. Are we as a family unit engaged, and are we inviting to other people? If we see other people walk into our doors that maybe we haven't seen before, are we willing to walk up to them and make them feel welcome? And as a whole parish, are we willing to get into that mentality? Because that's really what we need. We really need to be able to foster that welcome and accompaniment with people that may come into our door, because people like you might send a random person into the doors of our church. And if we're not ready for that moment, if we're not ready for that person, then that could be their one and done, if we're not ready in that moment. And so, it is a challenge that, it works full circle. And beyond that moment, welcoming them in, obviously people like me, I'll work with the high school, I'll work with the youth, but there are other programs and different things. And, just having house discipleship and things like that. I've seen people at my parish, like there's a woman that would invite a ton of other women, like a lot of them were mothers, to just go to her house and read the Bible and just chat and hang out, and be able to invite a lot of new people that were, new to the parish. So we're obviously in Norfolk, we have a heavy military presence. And so there's a lot of people that come in and out. And so that whole community of invite and making people feel welcome is even more, I would say, fluid.
It's critical
at a parish like mine, and it's absolutely necessary. I mean, there's already a bond that happens between military wives, who have to live a certain lifestyle with husbands deploying and different things like that. But in the same way, banding together in like, hey, we're just trying to live out this faith in a community of people who are trying to figure it all out at the same time. That's a huge deal.
We have at St. Paul Street Evangelization, we also have the Hospitality Institute, I think it's called, and we teach hospitality. We come into a parish and we'll teach a workshop for all the people that are on staff and the volunteers to help them recognize that they are often the very first evangelists that anyone sees. And Sherry is one of our instructors for this. She came up with the program and she does a wonderful job. And it is an attitude that of welcoming and no matter who it is that comes in. So it's such an important thing that not everybody necessarily recognizes.
I actually haven't personally been through that. And I think I would love to. I go, when I travel, I go to Catholic churches and I never even expect to be welcomed. I don't know if there's even this expectation, and what does it look like practically to be able to, walk in as a stranger and be able to feel like this is a place where you're wanted and desired to belong to, and that that you're supposed to belong to. And I think that's a question. I wonder, I'm just looking at my own stuff and I'm wondering how much I actually reach out to strangers. I'm part of a really big parish in downtown Indianapolis. We have several masses, and it's not uncommon. It would be probably, there's no way I go to every mass and I know everybody. And it's not like I make an effort at mass like, oh, I've never met this person, I need to go meet them. It's challenging me right now. Like I'm just having more of a personal moment of I need to be more intentional. Somebody. We have street evangelization, but what does it look like to have this welcoming hospitality mindset, even with me at mass in my own church?
I had a story of that it just blew me away when it came full circle. As I was getting my degree, I would do a lot of my studying before the Blessed Sacrament. As I'm reading through the saints or reading through Aquinas or whatever I'm reading through, I would just literally spend hours at our chapel just reading. And one time a young woman came in and she just stopped into the chapel, and I did start talking to her and put my books down for a while, and we had a beautiful conversation. And I didn't think much of it. And years later, she was at a different parish. She was in Alpha at a table with my dad. And she told her story how one of the things that brought her back to church was she would just stopped into a chapel one time, and there was a woman there studying who started talking to her about the faith and answered her questions. And that brought her on a road back to the church. And my dad's thinking, well, what parish was that? And she said the parish was St. Hugo. And my dad's like, that was my daughter, because she's the one that hangs there all the time. And It was. And so it was so funny. And then I had another connection with the same woman. I happened to see her at her work. She was in a job where you deal with the public. And I started talking with her. And of course, I gave her a medal. Next thing I know, she remembered me from years before. I didn't remember her, but she remembered me. So, you never know. Mm-hmm. You never know when an chance encounter is going to flourish and bloom. And, just being in church to talk to who's around there. Adam's got tremendous stories of the same thing, happening to be in church after hours, let's just say. Someone walked through, he started this conversation, You're right. It might be a once and done. If you have to take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even at the end of church, like people that are in the pews, that on a different level can apply, where for a lot of people on the streets, the only thing that's stopping them from coming into church is an invitation. But at the same time, people that are already in the church, The only thing that's stopping them from feeling more welcomed is somebody saying hello to them and asking them what their name is. And even if it's just a nod and a wave that happens like in the following weeks after that, it makes a huge difference.
That's true.
It would be. All right. That's my challenge for the week. And
there
for
you
me,
go.
I need to introduce myself to somebody new at Mass this upcoming Sunday. We'll see how that goes. Beth, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
I thought this is great to be able to speak with Aaron and hear about the young people. And I was particularly interested in how the identity of a young person who begins their life on smartphones and stuff and doesn't have the foundation of learning who they are from their parents, their teachers, their coaches, but instead have to develop who they are online right from the start. There really is a huge difference. I mean, even though the older kids still are probably on smartphones just as much, they didn't start there.
Yeah, for us, it's more about moderation, like an overuse of something than it is affecting our identity, and how we feel about ourselves.
It's at a core. So I thought that was really interesting.
That was really interesting.
How about you?
Aaron, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is interesting, especially hearing from you, just like, hey, these concepts apply to everyone, and it's true. It really, it is the temperature of our culture that we're living in a postmodern world that really subscribes to relativism and this idea of toleration and don't judge anyone because that means you hate people, and all of these things that are basically what you're walking up to when you look at somebody and you walk up to them on the street. There certainly are some differences. 13% of the kids today identify as atheists, which is twice as much as the adults of today. And so there are some differences, but a lot of these things are across the board and are affecting, the way that we have relationships with other people and form truth. And so the good antidote is wonder. I didn't mention that, but it's a big thing.
What's wonder?
It's important. Like to be able to look at the world with wonder.
Awe and wonder. Oh, yeah.
Right. I got a couple of really good quotes from John Paul II. Without wonder, men and women lapse into a deadening routine, and little by little become incapable of a life which is genuinely personal.
So how do they miss wonder?
If you're constantly on your phone, you're moving from stimuli to stimuli all throughout the day, from nonstop, you have absolutely no chance for wonder to stop and wonder about what's going on. To put your phone down and look around and wonder about the world around you.
Okay.
To have silence.
So let me just tell a quick story. So yesterday when I was able, my grandson was in town, so I was able to go for a walk. And so we're all cuddled up and we're out walking. And I pray the Hail Marys as I'm praying the rosary, but I had to keep quiet because the birds were going. And this little guy, his eyes are looking and he's listening, and just that little bit of quiet. And I can see what you're saying. It's like if kids aren't ever outside, never unplugged, they never hear the birds, they never hear, you miss the awe and wonder.
And silence is consistently a theme that popes and in the church history, people have always attributed silence to having the ability to listen to God and, to be able to have a disposition towards God. So it definitely ties into a lot of different things.
So your whole world is shrunk.
Yes.
To just what I can see and manage and do.
Mm-hmm.
And materialism, scientism, all that comes in because.
And you're so busy that there's absolutely no time to examine yourself, examine your life, let alone your conscience, because you're not alone with your thoughts long enough to even do that.
And that's what makes us most human. Is what separates us is our rationale and our ability to be able to think about our actions. And I mean, St. Ignatius, said the most important prayer was the examination of conscience. He would do it twice a day, once at noon and then once before going to bed. And that was his way of being able to, that is the most important prayer that
if you do nothing else.
Yeah, do nothing else. And I think the questions of wonder is, I've heard in those within the faith, it's something that we can never lose. It's important to continue to always have awe and wonder. And I think that's actually even what heaven's going to be like, isn't it? Just this continual awe and wonder of God. Awe and wonder? Yeah, I think so. Like there's this awe and wonder and this exchange of love with the Lord in heaven for eternity.
And I never thought about that relationship with God. Your relationship with God is completely transformed. If you don't know what a regular human relationship is, and that's distorted, then you're distorting what a relationship with God is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for being on today with Aaron, taking the time to just be able to share your report and you know how you felt its accuracy in your own experience in youth ministry, and also how we can, bring it to our own apostolate with our team leaders on the street. I just want to invite anybody who's listening as well. We extended the invitation in our last podcast to our retreat for evangelists that's going to be happening this summer, June 22nd through the 24th. Beth and I will be there leading it, helping the
fun.
And it's and we have an incredible retreat master that is going to be with us. Is Father Ben Lukey. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. And
he was the driver for Mother Teresa in Rome, and he's just full of incredible, really good stories. A lot of very deep spiritual man as well that will help us lead us on our spiritual journeys to grow in there. And we also want to grow in community with one another as evangelists. So that's going to be in Bloomington, Indiana from the 22nd to the 24th. And as always, if you want to learn more about finding a team in your area, you can go to our website, streetevangelization.com, and click on locations and see finding a team or even starting a team.
I think that's it. I just want to remind everybody what we're doing here. We're here at St. Paul Street Evangelization, where we train, equip, and mobilize ordinary Catholics to do the extraordinary work of evangelization in order to save souls.
Amen.
All right. Thank you so much, Aaron.
It was a pleasure.
God bless, guys.